What's up, people? I'm Shaggy, the opinionated hippie. Going to start a deep dive into 1989. I'm super excited for this. 1989 was sort of the first year when it was my first full year in college, started in fall of 88. I now had the freedom to pretty much see as many Dead shows as I wanted to and, still keep up really good grades. I was able to make that balance. Went to school in Northern California in Berkeley, and pretty much any show that was anywhere west of the Rockies, also maybe in Denver, there was somebody I knew or somebody I knew who knew somebody who was going to go to their shows, and hitching a ride to any Dead show anywhere on the West Coast was really easy to do. Plus, in the Bay Area alone, they played Shoreline like 6 to 9 times a year, Oakland Coliseum, Mardi Gras shows, New Year shows, sometimes some fall shows. It was heaven. So this is the era which I was sort of like, I'd been seeing shows for about 4 years already, but only in like high school. So it was like Southern California shows, Irvine Meadows, Long Beach, Hit Ventura. But those were the shows. And now I was like, the world had opened up to me. So this is the era that I love. It's in my DNA at this point. It's part of my genetic material. And so just the sound of these shows, the set list, everything about it, it makes me really happy. And right now in my life, just what's going on a macro level, on a micro level, this is the kind of music I'm going to need. So I was really excited to check this out. There were no Dave's Picks or Dick's Picks releases from 1989, not a single one. All of the 89 releases are these things like this, Crimson, White, and Indigo, usually a single show. We get the Warlock shows in this run. I'm going to save that for last. But I'm really excited because I do think this is some really good stuff. And this was where I sort of cut my teeth on living out of my car and being on tour and selling sodas and grilled cheeses and stuff. So fantastic stuff. And so today's show, we're talking about July 7th, 1989. Did not quite make it to this show. Hopped on the tour, I think the show after this, all the way through Alpine Valley. This was at JFK Stadium in Philly, which was condemned and torn down, or at least the condemnation happened like a week later. So I think this was the absolutely last show ever played at JFK, before it was condemned by the city of Philadelphia. So that's kind of cool. Came out in 2010, complete show from July 7th, 89. And it's a good show. Like, it's a great show. It's a fun show. Jerry is great. The mix is fantastic. Phil sounds amazing. And there's a lot of things to recommend. Opens up with Hell in a Bucket. I've always loved Hell in a Bucket as an opener. I've always loved Hell in a Bucket as an opener for the second set, the first set. I think I saw it close a number of sets in like the early mid 80s or the early late 80s. I don't know. 86, 87-ish. But by the time 89 hit, it was a pretty entrenched. I've been watching The Big Short lately, so the word tranche is in my head. It was entrenched in that opening spot, and it was generally Hell in a Bucket into Sugary. Never a fan of that. I never really... Hell in a Bucket was a song, as much as I loved it, I always thought it should have closed out first sets. I thought that the energy it brought was so undead-like, but also so like huge and rock and roll that it should have closed sets and not open sets. So I think it's a good set opener. My problem with it is Jerry, I don't think ever knew what to do with the second song. Generally, I think probably 80% of the time, Sugary was the song I saw follow. And I love Sugary. I would rank that in like, that's a top 10 Jerry song of all time, as far as I'm concerned, as far as like live performances go. But I never thought it worked well with the Hell in a Bucket energy. I just thought those were two different energies. And I thought it was just like, Jerry's like, all right, I got this number. Sometimes he'd try a Friend of the Devil or a Peggy O or even something like a Jack Rowe. It never worked. But in this show, we get a Hell in a Bucket Pretty short Hell in a Bucket. Not really jamming out anything too much, just hits hard and leaves. But it's followed with an Iko Iko. And to me, Iko Iko is one of those songs that's like really fun, but also kind of trippy. My favorite memories of Iko Ikos are like Oakland Coliseum, Henry Kaiser Auditorium in Oakland, New Year shows, Chinese New Year shows, Mardi Gras shows, when they would have the giant parade during the set, during like, you'd have a first set, then the second set would start off with this parade that would come through the floor, which is generally where we were. And you're looking up at these huge, like, paper mache, like Mardi Gras type floats. And Iko Iko was a really popular song for the Dead to play during these things. And it felt hedonistic and kind of surrealistic and kind of trippy because it's the beginning of the second set. You've been sitting down hanging out with your friends for like 40 minutes during the set break. You're just in a certain state of mind at that point. If you started this journey before the first set, the way certain psychedelic journeys happen right about the beginning of the second set is when things are really starting to amplify and you're starting to like head towards that peak. So Iko Iko to me was always just a really crazy, weird, trippy, upbeat song. Here, following Hell in a Bucket, it is the perfect complement of energies. Jerry's aggressive, he's trippy, he's leaning into those psych sounds. The energy is nothing like Hell in a Bucket energy. It's not driving rock and roll energy, but it's twisted into this almost New Orleans Mardi Gras carnival house, like just maze of weirdness. It is a fantastic 1-2 punch of an opener. It was in the daylight because this is July in Philly. So it wouldn't have had the luxury of crazy lights and just being lost in the dark. But even in the daylight, this just hit hard and it was fun and everybody's dancing. But those people who are indulgent and expanding their minds in a different way are going to really, really, really enjoy this Iko Iko. Absolutely phenomenal 1-2 punch. And it kind of doesn't let up. We get a Little Red Rooster. I think my favorite of the Bob's Blues songs of this era. It's just a lot more aggressive. It's a lot more meaner. It's got a little more attitude. Midland usually gets a really tasty solo, gets to drop some lines. Really fantastic. Ramble on Rose. In the 80s and 90s, Ramble on Rose was a much bigger first set song. It had some bounce to it. It had some weight to it. Jerry's solo meant something. When I think of it in the 70s, it's a lot more of it's still an impressive number. I still like it. But it seems quieter. Seems a little more restrained. It wasn't in the late 80s and 90s. It was a big song. Then we get a Stuck Inside a Mobile with the Memphis Blues again. One of their better Bob covers. The band nails it. Their arrangement is fantastic. Bob's performance is fantastic. Jerry's playing. Everything about this. It's perfect. Then we get a loser. If I had to pick any Jerry song to be in the first set, maybe Althea would be number one as far as those like mid-set, first set Jerry songs. Loser would be number 2. I don't think I've ever heard a Loser I didn't like. Solo is fantastic. It's nice, it's intense. They hit it. And as soon as it ends, Bob immediately is hitting those Let It Grow chords. And we are off into a 12.5-minute Let It Grow heaven. That middle jam in Let It Grow before they go into the dun, 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 dun. It is long, it is spacey, it is out there. When they first enter that meaty jam area towards the end, Jerry's really distorted, really intense, but he's kind of spacing out his attacks. Like it's kind of staggered, like got this burst of energy. Now I'm going to lay back and let the band establish. Now I got this burst of energy. Now I'm going to lay back. And he kind of does that a couple times before he just like takes off for like the far regions of like outer space while the band tries to keep some semblance of like a Let It Grow groove going. Very dynamic, very awesome. It's almost like they reach their peak. Usually it's like that dun, dun, dun change comes at like a midway point where you're like, it's going to keep going. In this version, it's like, it's almost like they really ran out of energy and it's just like, all right, we're just going to glide on home to the end of the song. So even though it doesn't quite have the same crazy out there psych energy, the chillness of it and the acceptance of the chillness of it makes it really, really good. And then we get that could have ended the set and I would have been happy, though it would have been a short 7 songs. But we get a blow away to end. And I've always been torn on blow away. I kind of like the intro. I like that almost Terrapin Station-esque, like the actual Terrapin Station, that instrumental jam after the inspiration part, when they repeat those like musical like motifs. There was a little lick to this that reminds me a lot of Terrapin Station, that repeating riff. I like that. I think that's a really cool riff. But they always do this thing where they stop the song and they let Brent go off on like these, like, you'll take your heart and rip your heart out of your chest, and that's where all the love is. And I never really liked his rants. And I always think, I don't know if they're embarrassing, but I wish they didn't happen. And so if I have a complaint about the first set, it's the blow away Brent rant at the end. But all things considered, that's a pretty minor complaint for what is a pretty home run of a first set. Just absolutely amazing. And I do think that if someone had like blow away, particularly, especially the verse chorus part of it, if like someone like Ted Templeman, I think that's his name, the guy who produced like the Doobie Brothers Minute by Minute, if he had produced like some Midland stuff and given it like a Doobie Brothers sort of soft rock sheen, I think he could have had some hit singles in there. Midland's got a good voice. He can get that Michael McDonald sound. And I think the verse chorus of this has that Doobie's energy. But when he tries to get jammy and tries to get psych and tries to fit into this weird dead mold that he thinks he needs to fit into, I don't think it works as well. But that's about Blow Away and not about this performance, which, if you like Blow Away, I think this is a good performance of Blow Away. That all is disc 1, first set. Disc 2 opens up with Box of Rain, which Phil passed away a little less than a month ago. I'll take any and every Box of Rain. It's perfect. The audience knows it. The band knows it. Such a great way to open a set. And as before the last chord is finished, Jerry is right into the dun, dun. We're right into Scarlet Begonias. And you can just... I've been at a couple shows where Scarlet was the second song. I think I've even seen a couple Box Scarlets back in my day. And people are dancing for Box, but it has this different sort of reverence in the audience when a Box of Rain is played. It was a special vibe. And I can see how the audience would be like, yeah, we're in this special vibe. Now we're in Scarlet. We're just going to hedonistically dance our butts off for like the next 10 plus minutes because that's what Scarlet's about. And you can feel the energy. The band is nailing it. It's vibrant. It's enthusiastic. Jerry is jamming. Just an absolutely perfect segue from Box into Scarlet. And it almost feels like knowing the Box of Rain is about Phil's dad, passing and just the loss of life, the acceptance of death, sort of mortality. It almost seems like Box of Rain is kind of the funeral, but it's like an upbeat funeral. We're going to celebrate the living and not mourn the death. And Scarlet is the wake in which everybody just shares stories and everybody has a good time and manages to find like the joy in a life that's been lost. And there's just something very, very let it all go about the Scarlet Begonias. Scarlet's good. Nice jam. They kind of take a while to set it up before Jerry and Phil together just launch off into sort of Scarlet psych space. Jerry has this one idea that he kind of keeps toying with over and over again, and Phil's kind of along with him. It's a really neat, relatively short Scarlet, pretty smooth segue into Fire. And the Fire is just fire. Every solo, Jerry's bringing something different. Every solo, he's bringing it for longer than you expect. There's an intensity to everything. The performances are great. Every time Jerry ends a solo and we go back into the next verse, that cut, that downbeat into the back into the group, into the riff is tight. It's smooth. It's like the band rehearsed this for a while. Like they are nailing the Fire on the Mountain. Bob responds with an estimated profit, which is a great call there. Looks like Rain could have slowed this whole thing down. Estimated does not. Jerry's aggressive but low key and estimated. It's a pretty straightforward estimated profit jam, but a nice estimated profit jam. Only clocks in at under right around 9 minutes. It feels short, feels like you want more. But considering you got a box of Rain to open, it just kind of feels like an extra tune. And considering just kind of how epic the fire is, I'm okay with it. And then Jerry delivers a Standing on the Moon. Yeah, could have been an Eyes, but no, I don't think this set needed an Eyes. This set needed something to kind of balance out that box of Rain. And the Standing on the Moon is perfect. Jerry really doesn't go off as much at the end with that be with you, I want to be with you, as he would in a couple years where he's just all out losing it. But every note is perfect. That solo is just perfectly captures the emotion of like missing someone, yet being in this beautiful place and trying to appreciate the beauty, but wishing you were experiencing it with someone else. It is such a good Standing on the Moon that it almost seems like when they go into drums is really low key. Like I think Mickey's just on like hand drums for a while. It's almost like they recognize that the Standing on the Moon created like this special space, and like it's like a moment of silence after awesomeness, and the drums slowly like honor that before like things go a little more crazy. And we get your typical rhythm devils, get a really nice space, kind of chill, kind of eerie, kind of works its way up into a weird sounding thing because we're going into the other one. The other one is, as I described in a couple videos ago, what I know the other one to be before I really discovered like the early 70s versions, which are just monsters. My experience with the other one in like the 80s and 90s is it's 6 to 10 minutes of really intense, aggressive playing with really, really trippy verse courses. Like when they go into the, Spanish lady comes to me, she lays on me this rose, Midland's going, and then Phil's going in the opposite direction. Just hands down, one of the most psych, trippy, out there sounding songs they did. But it was short and it was intense and it was usually easily over within like 10 minutes. 10 minutes would be a long version in my time. And that's kind of what this is. It's about 8 minutes long, really intense, kind of a long buildup before we get a pretty decent, not the most monster of it. But the middle jam, short, incredibly tasty, incredibly aggressive, really works well for what this is. If you don't listen to 89 and you only know the other ones from like the early 70s, you're going to be like, oh, this is interesting. 7.5 minutes of this. But it's what they did back in this era, and it's really good. Then we get a War Frat. I'm always in on War Frats. Love War Frat. It's not going to be a Morning Dew. Give me a War Frat. Jerry's singing is great. The storytelling is great. And then I don't think I've heard a Turn on Your Love Light from this era in a long time, because this sounded good and this sounded fun and I really enjoyed it. And I think I like a 8.5 minute 89 Turn on Your Love Light over like a 30-minute 70 Love Light. There are some absolutely amazing jams in a 30-minute 1970 Love Light, but they're usually somewhere in the middle, and I got to sit through a lot of stuff I can do without. I really enjoyed this as a closer. Thought it was fantastic. Don't know how many times. I haven't looked to remind myself what else is popping up in these 89s. I know what the second sets are bringing, but usually once we get through drum space, the draw isn't as strong, so I don't know how many other Love Lights are coming up in 89, but I really, really enjoyed this one. And then the encore, something no band should ever do, except for Dylan in 74 with the band, Knocking on Heaven's Door. Just not my favorite. It's a good performance. Jerry's feeling it. I think if you're a Knocking on Heaven's Door fan, this might make you happy because they're on fire tonight. Philly's bringing out the best. I've been to the East Coast to see shows. I would say probably 75% of the shows I saw were the West Coast. Probably maybe 25 were East Coast, Midwest. The crowds on the East Coast are nothing like the crowds on the West Coast. Way more energy, way more enthusiasm, way more just energy that doesn't compare to the West Coast at its wildest. And at times when the band responded to that, the results were pretty epic. And to me, this is an absolutely, absolutely fantastic 89 show. I enjoyed it. So far, it's number one because I haven't listened to any others yet. But I'm really excited to continue this deep dive. And this is comfort music to me. The world's falling apart. I'm seeking comfort. So these might come pretty quickly, but I don't know. But anyways, yeah, check this out, man. Crimson, White, and Indigo. The Dead in 89. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Subscribe, like, share, comment, do those things. And check this out, man. That's all I got to say. Peace. Talk to you later.